How's it going today? Today we're going to talk about the best portfolio that you can do as a beginner. This is a portfolio I've been using for years. It really is really good. Make sure you like, subscribe. Make sure you like this channel and everything like that. And I always do individual stocks picking, investment advice, kind of the overall market news updates. See why I've been doing it. Make sure you like, subscribe. Everything. We're just going to get into it. These are actually for beginners. I don't recommend any stocks for beginners per se. These are actually ETFs. So I'm going to try to make this kind of easy for a beginner that doesn't really have any exposure into financial markets at all. I mean, this is kind of like, what do I do first? I have, let's say, a couple $1,000 and I want to invest, or I have a way where I can make extra income and I want to invest. I want to get into the markets. I don't really believe a person should really just buy a couple stocks if they don't really understand financial markets, if they don't understand accounting, if they don't understand any of that, because, you know what I mean, or they don't have the temperament. Also, there's a lot of things you have to learn before buying individual stocks to be really kind of, maybe not successful. I mean, well, sort of skilled. I mean, you could do it and you might get lucky. You may not. You might watch one of my videos, which is kind of like beyond beginner. They understand some things. But anyway, I just make this really, which you can actually get a very good return. Actually, this portfolio actually beats the S&P. So you can buy the S&P. That's what a lot of people, or you can do this strategy, which actually beats the S&P, actually by quite a bit. I could get into the numbers. And before, it's actually just free ETFs that I've always liked and always bought, and I've been holding them for about 3 or 4 years. Anyway, before we get into it, make sure you like, subscribe if you really want to learn more about it, and I go show you. You can always leave a comment what you do. Anyway, we're gonna get right into it. The first one is actually the S&P 500 Vanguard Index Fund. So essentially, an index fund, I'm going it basically just tracks the S&P. If anybody goes, hey, the S&P's up today, or the market, when they speak about the market, they normally talk about the S&P. That's really what they're talking about. It has the 500 largest companies in it, and it's all kind of weighted by the market cap. So the largest company in the S&P is actually Microsoft. I'm just going to lift off the top 10. It's Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, Google, Johnson & Johnson. So, well, actually, the top 8. One's in the company. Obviously, these are massive companies, and actually, the Vanguard S&P 500 Index Fund actually pays a dividend. So that's also nice. It kind of just piles it all up and then pays it out. So, I mean, in the S&P, it's really actually pretty hard to do it. But here's the thing. You only allocate 50%. In this portfolio, you only allocate 50% into this fund. And that's what I've always done, is I just put 50% in of my money. So let's say you have 2,000, you put 1,000. So, and that's how you kind of do it. You kind of allocate it so you get some kind of, this is what I call a baseline. And the other ones are actually focused on growth. But moving on to the next one is Triple Q. It's actually a Nasdaq index. It follows the Nasdaq, and actually this is where all the growth comes from. But the Nasdaq is a little more volatile, so essentially it will sell off more. It's basically, you can just buy it also straight, just like a regular stock. It's just, you type in QQQ, and it'd be the Nasdaq thing. You can buy it on Robinhood, commission free. I use Robinhood. It's easy. It's simple. I think our Robinhood is probably the best thing for a beginner because it's easy. It's simple. That's why I really like it. I go like a video down in the comments why I like Robinhood versus TD Ameritrade, but it has to update because I said there was commissions. Actually, there's no commissions. So essentially, I still like Robinhood. I still use Robinhood because it's easy. It's simple. But anyway, back into the Nasdaq. This is more tech heavy. So essentially, the biggest companies are once again Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. I mean, they're really kind of the biggest companies in the world. It's market weighted. So, and then then it has Intel, and then Cisco, and I think and then it's kind of, but it does have some ones like Pepsi in there too. So you're kind of getting the best of, it's centered around the Nasdaq, which is 500, it's 100 companies. So it's kind of centered around more tech companies. So think of NVIDIA and Intel. So essentially, usually tech companies have more growth opportunities. They're growing into emerging markets. They normally have more growth, but they're more cyclical. So essentially, let's say, Intel's one of these things. It's really, really good when the economy is doing well. Then when people are not advancing their technologies, they don't really buy the Intels and stuff like that. So essentially, they get hit a little bit more, in nature. And semiconductors like NVIDIA's in the Nasdaq, a little more weighted heavily in the Nasdaq. But I only put in 30% into the Nasdaq because like I said, because back last year the market sold off about 19%. I think the Nasdaq actually dropped to 21%. So I actually went into bear market territory for a couple weeks. So you lost quite a bit. So for a beginner, nobody really wants to lose half their 20% of their money. But now we're going out and that's 30% allocation. So now we're going into the Vanguard Growth Fund. Now this is a Vanguard ETF again. It's weighted. It's definitely weighted. It's weighted more to growth sides of the kind of the investment world. It focuses more on the MasterCards and the Visa. But JP Morgan, it's a good company. It's not really growing as fast as MasterCard and Visa. So it takes them companies, they're still large companies. But they just kind of weight it differently. So that's real, but it's still 500 companies. It just kind of weighted differently. So the less growth they have, the less allocation they have, but it's still weighted. So a company that's, let's say, growing at 40%, but it's let's say it's a $50 billion company, it's a little weighted less versus a company that's slightly bigger. So it just kind of balances it out. So the Vanguard Growth Fund, that's the ticker is VOOG, and now you only allocate 20%. So this portfolio, you have 50% S&P, 30% Nasdaq, and 20% Vanguard Growth. And now here's the returns. I did some math, did some numbers 5 years ago from today. If you would have done this, you would have had $1,000 in the S&P, $600 in the Nasdaq, and then the Growth Fund be $400. So you would actually have a return of 67%. Now, on average, the S&P over the 5 years went up 53%. So you have actually beaten the market pretty easily by just buying these things and just allocating them to them percentages. So it's really actually pretty easy. Let's say you have a couple $1,000. You can just allocate it into them, and because all of these are around the same price. So you just buy maybe 4 of the S&P, 2 of the Nasdaq, and then maybe 1 of the Vanguard. It go kind of, and that's really, and it will tell you the percentage of portfolio, and you just kind of, excuse me, but if you want a little more risk, and this is kind of what I do, because I really don't really care about the risk. I don't really care about the volatility. I just keep buying it more when it goes down. And I don't put money in it that I'm going to need in the next 3 years. So I sit back and really think, do I need the money? Then I don't put the money in there. But if you're someone like that keeps throwing it in there, then you probably need a little more risk, because you may have to take the money out if you're not very good with capital allocation and stuff like that. But if you want to do 50-50 with the Nasdaq, because the Nasdaq is actually the best performing with 96% return versus the S&P is actually 57%, which I believe you should just always have the S&P in this thing. So you just do 50-50, you're actually up 76%. So actually, you really blew, you crushed the market over the last couple, up over that. So if you really done it, if you really think about it, you've really done well, because to put that in perspective, that's, beating Tesla, over the last couple years, YouTube's favorite stock, it actually is beaten, this fund has actually beaten Tesla and pays dividends, and you don't really have to do any research, you don't have to really do anything, it's beaten it actually, because Tesla's only up 36%. I mean, there's some stocks that have done well, but, they're a lot more volatile. I mean, when stocks sell off, they sell off 20, 30%. They're normally double the market both ways if they're a good growth stock. So, I mean, if the market goes up 100%, it might be up 200, 300%, but when it goes down, it goes down even more. I've seen like Match Group has done well, and it's beaten this portfolio, but it got cut in half multiple times on an earnings report. You have to sit there, and then it goes down 20%, and then you have to kind of go in there, and that could be kind of stressful for a beginner that doesn't really have the time, doesn't really, it's for really someone that doesn't really care about stocks and doesn't really like financials. They don't sit around and evaluate companies. They really don't care, but they want to make money, so that's what these index funds are really, really good for. And I always recommend them for a beginner that doesn't really understand accounting, because I believe to buy individual stocks, you should at least take a small accounting course, so you have to know what, at least what a balance sheet is, a cash flow statement, and an income statement, and really have to dig into them numbers and really understand it. Or you just kind of go lose money, and you won't really understand the numbers, and you won't really understand it, and that takes time. So I fully understand why people don't get into it. But I believe everybody should own stocks, because that on average is around almost a 14% return rate. So with the Nasdaq, the 50/50 with the S&P and the Nasdaq, so that is really, really good for that. So that's why I recommend them. Or if you do the growth, you're still beating the market without even really putting any more extra work. I mean, I've always trusted these funds. They're really, really good. So hopefully that helped. Leave a comment. See what you do, I mean, or any stocks. I always read the comments. I really like to see what you guys think and everything. And anyway, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I can do daily updates, or pick stocks. I like picking stocks, what I buy. But I also believe this is really where a beginner, should be maybe your retirement or whatever. I really believe this portfolio will outperform majority of stocks. It's really actually pretty hard to really beat this fund over the long term, actually, that I've come up with it. So anyway, thank you for watching, and subscribe, and thank you. I can see you on the next episode or whatever. Thank you.